What's happening, everyone? Haven't seen you all for a very long time, or was it about 24 hours ago? Good to see everyone today. Happy Tuesday. We are breaking down barriers. We are blowing up the charts. We are having some fun for a change. We are unsad. And today we have a very special episode. PulseChain Validator number 33, AMA number 33. I'm excited for this. I got Game on the show. He's back. And got a lot of good content. I think I've been working on some just how a validator works. I feel like there's so many pieces that are in it, first of all, and so many pieces you kind of got to be a nerd to understand. And then they're scattered everywhere. It's like impossible to find a diagram in this stuff. So I didn't make a diagram for y'all, but I put together some content. Produced some content around it, and got a little bit of better understanding myself with some pieces too, which was interesting. We're going to talk through that. We're going to talk about RPCs. Game has got some services up and running, helping all the community with that. And if you got any questions, PulseChain or otherwise, put them in the chat, validating, whatever you want to talk about. We'll be going for a little over an hour or so. And we got a great show for you. So get to chat in just a moment. Let me introduce him, welcome him back to the show. I'm going to give him a second. I see he's busy in the green room. And then I'm going to give him about 10, 3, 2, 1. Okay, back to the show. Gamma DevOps, how's it going?
Hey, how you doing? I'm back at it. I'm always here doing stuff. I got invited to your channel, so I thought, oh, you want to talk about validating? Sure, yeah, it's right up my alley.
You did a couple of validating things before.
He's always blaming the validators. I too blame the validators for all. They are our overlords, producing our blocks for us.
They do. Validators. They run a tight ship. They run a tight ship.
Yeah, you got to make sure you tip your validators. You know what I mean? That's what keeps the show running.
I like those tips. Tips are nice.
Oh my god, I got a 600,000 PLS tip once, but the guy 2 days ago said he got like a 1.3 million PLS tip, in his for the block that he produced, and I was like, yeah, that happens. That's cool. Every once in a while.
I'm trying to think the biggest one I got. It wasn't anywhere near that, but you just kind of get lucky sometimes.
I don't pay too much attention to it. I just noticed it was like this is like early days, like day 4 or 5 of PulseChain launch, and everyone was kind of that period of time when gas prices started to go from 100 to 10,000 up to 1 million, where it's sitting now, and everyone was like over tipping.
Oh yeah.
And then now people are still confused on gas, how gas works sometimes, but
it's all coming to plan. It's all coming to plan.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, by the way, everyone, got my jewelry out today. Got my I don't know how many karat gold it is, but it's a few karat gold. I think it goes well with the shirt and on top of my other Pulse logo for the shirt. So thought I'd bring that out today since we're allowed to talk about having money and outreach marketing, and everything's fine again because the price went up. Green candle syndrome, sir. I tell you, green candle syndrome. How are you feeling out there, Gamma? Do you like price going up?
I mean, I like my Omega that I bought.
Oh, now we're talking jewelry.
Omega. I like wearing this thing. It's very nice. No Rolexes.
Not yet.
I'm not special. 80s for Rolex. I'm a noob. I'm just a poor John. They're not going to give me a Rolex. I'm not special. But the Omega dealer is more than happy to take my money and give me a fantastic watch. So
they tend to do that. They've been known to do
that. I have money to spend. You're like snobby. You're like, oh, you're not good enough to get by a Rolex over here.
Sir, please put on a nicer sweater before you come into our store with the line. There's a queue, by the way.
No, it's fine.
I went to the where was I the other day? Was it Louis Vuitton? Burberry. I went to the Burberry store and picked up a couple things right before the highest stakes came out. Picked up a shirt and some other little bit of clothes and stuff.
Oh, speaking of Burberry, my glasses are Burberry. Oh my god,
nice.
Over here.
I like that. Dude,
yeah,
legit. That's community is about that. We're about wearing fancy
jewelry. Over here.
So I'm trying to look around. Oh yeah, I got one more thing here. Boom! Somebody say Burberry. Boom! We're doing a fashion show today. This used to be Validator AMA. Now it's fashion.
Oh yeah, we're going back to a year ago, 2 years ago, when Richard was doing all those unboxing videos and like all this random stuff. I was like, oh my god, I don't know about that.
You know what? I should do an unboxing video for the highest stakes. Just do that.
You got one of the premium ones where they send you the box?
I may have acquired one.
Yeah, I got the. Oh, here. I got the. Boom. I got this at the showing. You can't see it. It's the. Right, you can't see it, but it's the. Movie poster, right?
I can tell the silhouette. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's a blur.
That's cool.
It's a blur. When I went to my showing, they had a bunch.
Sweet. Yeah, I wish I would have got to go to that. Quick question before we get into the nerd stuff. GK, I guess I have a question. Explain a scenario when PLX could do 100x or more, because I already see a lot of volumes. Difficult things. This could be 100x. Gamma, what do you got on that?
I don't answer any of those questions.
No comment.
You buy it. I mean, you throw them $1 billion in and see what the price does. I don't know.
Do people have $1 billion in our ecosystem? Some people have that.
I have no idea. I'm just saying.
Few whales.
Price goes up, you buy. So how markets work.
I feel like I've seen a few whales that are tossing around a little bit of money lately, millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Well, up to billions.
I mean, right now the bridge is free, and I saw that Grant Card, like a tweet. It was a tweet. It was like Grant Cardone's brother, Gary. It was like he put in $1 million on the bridge. Well, the bridge is free right now. There's no fee. Will that always be the case? Well, probably not. But I mean, right now the bridge is free. So if you want to put money onto PulseChain or take money off of it, you still have a gas cost. But yeah, it's a thing.
That seemed to be when the bridge went free, when we gave the bridge freedom. It seemed to be around the timeline of a lot of interesting things started happening. So,
well, you can talk about a little bit about the bridge. It's like, okay, bridges have fees for a reason, because security, and you want the people who are validating the transactions to have an incentive to be honest. And then your transaction, as long as everyone else's transaction is all treated equally. So, there's a reason why there's a bridge fee. So is it cool that it's free? Fantastic. But, it's like a thing.
So have we moved the trust model? Do you feel like the bridge is more centralized in? Is that why we're able to not be affected by the security part? Or do you think we are?
Well, I mean, right now, bridge validators are providing a service. So
maybe they got paid enough and they're like,
I don't want to speak about it. Yeah, I can't really speak on it too much. I'm just saying bridges have a fee for a reason. And although the bridge is free now, I'm saying, perhaps it's not always going to be free. Perhaps this is a limited time offering, kind of a, let's get people into the bridge. Let's get people into PulseChain. But, I don't want to talk about it too much. I'm just saying, I don't think there should be any expectation the bridge is always going to be free from now on, just because temporarily it was free.
Yeah. I mean, same paradigm with validators and stuff, right? Like you're getting paid to do it.
We're talking about validators. So like there is a fee to do transactions on the network. The fee is there so that it's spam protection, but then it's also giving the validators who run hardware, who have power, internet costs, like an incentive to, make money to pay for those services so the network can continue to exist. So the bridge is being ran by a group of people that are pretty awesome, I'm sure, but they also have costs. And I'm just saying. But when we talk about PulseChain validators, right? If you turned off all of the money, all of the fees, how many people are going to be validating? I like getting my PLS as an incentive to run validators, and I run a lot of validators. And I'm a nice person, and I run nodes for free. I run a RPC service for free.
Yeah, talk about that. Talk about why you run RPC service and what that is.
Okay, so I have some history. There's actually a decent story. So I was on Matic last cycle, and I came into Matic from Ethereum right before they did the branding change, where they went to Polygon, right? So I got into Matic at like a cent or 2 cents, something like that. And then they rebranded, and I got an instant like 5x off of Matic. because I just happened, magically, luckily, totally not skill. It was absolute luck. The day before they rebranded, I bought Matic at like 1 or 2 cents. They rebranded, and then we went up to like 8 cents or something. So, it was like a 3 or 4x. It was like, at that time, I was super happy about that. And I was in the Matic ecosystem, using their yield farms, using the quick swap, which was the DEX, right? Similar to PulseX for PulseChain. And, I was on there, and it really started taking off. 4 or 6 months later? And the public RPC was okay. But then when you have this huge influx of people into the network, the public RPCs really got overwhelmed. And no matter how good you are, if you have too many people rush into a central service and you don't have like other alternatives, kind of the pressure relief valve, you're like, okay, this one is good, but it's being overwhelmed. Now I can go to this other service that's just as good, but it's being ran by somebody else. So my alternative was a thing called Block Faction, Block Vigil, and then Matic Vigil is the RPC name, the company, and they're ran by a company called Block Vigil. It's on Matic, and they're an RPC provider similar to Infura for Ethereum. And they're like a legit company, and you go to the website, you get an API key, and you pay for the services. And I use them to get RPC access for Matic, for Polygon, and it worked great. When PulseChain was first kind of in its infancy, version 1, version 2, and that prior experience of having that on Polygon, I know there's not going to be any big companies that are really going to support PulseChain out the gate. So I learned how to run RPCs myself during, like, say, the V1 time period of PulseChain, when we were still under the BSC model, right? So I learned how to run RPCs, which isn't hard, but it's not easy either. It's very detailed. You have to get the settings really well if you want to run a really good RPC, especially at scale, which is what I want to do. Then there's all these different configurations you have to do. You have Nginx configurations, which is a reverse proxy, which is mostly websites for the crowd, right? Websites are ran, and then usually you're going to have a reverse proxy, which is Nginx, that will take the traffic from the internet, route it through to your server through Nginx. The TCP connections will hit your like port 443 in, and then get routed to the backend service, which is going to be like the app that you're running. So in our case, the app that we're running is Aragon, the one I'm running. It could be Geth, but it's Aragon. So I'm running a Lighthouse consensus client for the staking, validators, that consensus data. And then it's paired with Aragon on the same machine. And the port is 8545. So that's just the port that you would connect to, and you'd get the balance data, token balances from. You'd send your any transactions that you're going to send to the network. You would send it right from your wallet through the internet, through Nginx. It gets routed to the backend service, and then now you're living in your transactions inside the mempool, and now you're in, say, the Pulse node, which is talking to other peers, hundreds of them possibly. They're all sharing transactions. They're all sharing blocks that are produced by validators. Usually an RPC isn't also a validator, but the privacy RPCs you see popping up, what they're doing is basically they just configured the transaction pool to send transactions only to validators that they own and operate. So the transactions aren't actually being populated to the general population of peers, like the overall network. Like with my RPC, like it's not directly connected to validators in that way. It's an open, right? So you send transactions through my RPC. It talks to any peer that's valid. They all share transactions, and then those transactions get shared, with all the validators that are on the network. And then those
are you saying the
transactions
PulseChain
into
official
the
ones are
network.
different than that?
What?
Are you saying the PulseChain official ones are different than that?
No. The PulseChain official runs exactly like mine. It's open, and it shares transactions with every peer that it's connected to, and it shares all of its transactions with everyone. I'm talking about a private RPC that you see popping up.
Gotcha.
Is the way that works is it's fundamentally the same. The only difference is the transaction pool. So you send a transaction through their RPC, it sits in the memory pool of the nodes for that RPC, and those nodes only share the transaction with validators that they've whitelisted, basically.
Gotcha.
So it's not shared with the general population of peers. So that transaction's waiting for a validator that's in their smaller set of validators to come around in the committee to. It's like a validator. It's totally totally.
Yeah, it's just a private validator network.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, the way the validators work, which is I was going to say is like right on the subject we're talking about, is all the validators in the entire network, they get put into committees, and each committee is assigned to like an epoch, which is 32 slots, and there's 32 blocks in a slot, and each one of 32 validators inside of this committee are assigned to produce a block, and then all the other validators in that committee actually attest that that block is valid. So most validators are just attesting all the time, and attesting just means you're just verifying the block, that all the transactions inside the block are valid. The block is valid as soon as enough, or the majority, like more than 67% of the validators in that committee. 67% is a number that everyone needs to remember, because that's the threshold at which finalization happens. To say, if 67% of the validators that are inside that committee attest that the blocks are good, and then the final epoch is good, and then that epoch is locked in, and you can say that that epoch is locked in. It's actually 3 epochs, so it's between 2 and 3, because depending where you are in time, you're gonna have your current epoch, and then you're gonna have 2. So you have your current epoch, and then you have 1, right? When that finalizes, then you have another one, and then you continue, and then you have a second one. As soon as that second one finalizes, locks in, then your transaction is final. This is how the bridge validators actually work, because you have to have a finalized transaction, one that cannot be reorged or go away, before you can say validate a bridge transaction as actually valid. You have to wait for finalization, which is this process of, right, you're in a current epoch, like I said, and then you're waiting for that current epoch to be finalized, and then you're like, okay, great, then you have another one finalized. So it's like 2,
Yeah,
really.
So why would you spend the time, money, effort, and stuff to build a community one? Do you think the official one's ever going to go away? Is it for redundancy?
Well, no. So you need options. So now there is redundancy. So if you already have, like, if you put in the time to make something that's robust, scalable, and like everyone could like literally move to mine. Now, would that put mine under strain? Yeah, I'd love to see that, by the way, because it would really give me
decentralization,
some settings and stuff inside my server.
Community run, we'll say.
Yeah, it's community ran. But you have the official RPC. Great. It's not going away or anything. I'm just saying that there's good to have alternatives. Like my alternative on Matic was, I used the official one. It kind of got overloaded. Then I went to Matic Vigil as my RPC provider that I just paid like $20 a month for, or whatever. In our case, for PulseChain, we have the official RPC. Works fine. Mine, it should be basically the same. It should be almost as good or as good as the official one. Put a lot of effort into making it as good as possible. And then you have now nodes has one. They have an API key, so it's really more for, say, teams to plug in an API into the header of their transactions, like a Web3 application. I looked at theirs. I'm sure it's fine. I'm just saying it's not for like regular users to plug into MetaMask, because you're not plugging in an API into the header of a MetaMask transaction with MetaMask. it's a link, right? They give you a special location URL to plug into the MetaMask, and then you still know your transactions with that link, and then it's rate limited and everything. There's another provider called Public Nodes. There's another one called All Nodes, which I think might be the same thing. So there's all these weird All Nodes, Public Node, whatever, and those are all providing RPC services publicly with varying degrees of, like, say, scalability. And so you can go to chainless.org, look at PulseChain, and then you can look at, like, say, the 4 or 5 options there are. But right now, really, I would say the top 2 RPCs to have available, you're going to have the official one, which is on pulsechain.com. You're going to have mine. You shouldn't have any problems with mine. And if you do, let me know. Last week I had a timeout problem because I was doing some kind of testing a new configuration, and that didn't work out very well.
You failed. Tell him you failed. Gamma, tell him.
I had like 100 timeouts over 50 million calls. So,
software is hard. Say it. Software is hard.
I mean, Six Sigma, I was good. Yeah, I know it's hard. Yeah.
You're doing amazing work, man. You're doing amazing.
Yeah. This is great. Yeah. So like what I have to do here actually in the chain list is this privacy part right here, which is important. I actually need to see update chain list with a privacy policy. And then mine's private because I don't have logs. I don't share logs with anybody. Then in all that, right? So, I mean, it's literally me, and I'm not sharing that information with anybody. But then if I just put that on my website, which is g4mm4.io, gamma.io, then I can get that on there, which is kind of important. People want privacy. You get it with mine. Now, it's not a private RPC, which is different than having just basic privacy where I'm not sharing, your data with anybody.
I just want to show too, because I open sourced PLS Watch to watch transactions against DEXs and stuff. And you mentioned about anonymizing or not keeping the logs and all that stuff. If anyone's interested in that, there's with Nginx, there's ways to configure it to literally like anonymize your logs, turn it off, like don't keep this data. So if you want to not keep the data, there are ways to do it. And like I have documentation here if anyone's interested.
Yeah. with Nginx, you can just turn off logging completely.
Well, if you turn off logging, the only thing about that is you don't get stats. Like if you want to know visitors and metrics and stuff. But if you anonymize the logs, then you still get the timestamps and the number of visitors, but you don't get all the personal information, for example. So that's the caveat. Yeah. But good point.
I'm not capturing a lot of metrics right now, which I need to improve on. So there's some things I need to do where we're also keeping the, no logs. I'm not keeping any data because most of what people are going to care about are your IP address and your transaction history, like the linkage there, right? You can't go back and then link together a bunch of IP addresses and transactions to say this IP address owns this wallet that was doing these transactions, blah, 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 like all that, right? So my setup does that because I just don't keep those logs. But as I set up metrics, then, how do I need to set up my server so that I can keep privacy, but then I'm also, right, gather the metrics so that if I do get timeouts that I know immediately I can fix them. If I get a lot of scale, which would be really awesome for me, then there's going to be some server level, like kernel level, like tweaking that I'm going to need to do for TCP connections. That if I have good metrics, then I can kind of like look at the metrics and I can kind of tweak some variables for TCP. I'm not really at a point where I have to worry about that right now. But in a year from now, who knows how much traffic's happening on PulseChain, and then how much does my service get, and then so that's a thing that I'm going to have to worry about here pretty soon.
Well, thank you for doing it, man. I know it's a lot of work. I mean, as someone who runs, Go Real DeFi, it's like You know, I can imagine every time if your RPC does something happens to it, it goes down or some error or timeout or whatever, you're like, oh my God, I gotta go fix it. Like people relying on this stuff. I get it. It's definitely community coming together and building these services is it's a thankless job for the most part, but we do it.
People ask me what do I get out of running a public RPC. I was like, well, I mean, I get a good reputation, right? So you might want to follow me on Twitter. That'd be really awesome. Right. Mm-hmm. And then, so I'm building my own brand of like somebody who's competent running this stuff, which is, I mean, that's invaluable right there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and then
not screwing people over is underrated.
Right. I mean, just saying you build a name for yourself in a niche that you've created for yourself, because there's an opportunity here. Like it's a service that's definitely needed. People use it. I just yesterday, I hit 2 million calls over a 30-minute period, which, you know, isn't like a huge amount, but I started out like with 100. So it's like, you know, you incrementally start, more people hear about it, more people start using it, people start sharing it in the chats. Awesome. You know what I mean?
Got a couple questions, chat. I just want to get to Validator dashboard. If there's a Validator monitoring site, what metrics would you like to see as a validator?
Well, there are dashboards already. Prometheus and Grafana. You can.
It sounds like Validator dashboard is then maybe they're building something and they're looking for feedback for.
That's stuff. Validator dashboard. Oh, I hear you. Yeah. I would just look at the ones from Ethereum, for staking, the Grafana dashboards, and if it has that stuff, then that's great. Because I used on the Ethereum side, because I was running Geth and Prism for over 2 years on Prodder testnet, which is now Goerli, because they merged them, and I was using their internal dashboard on Prism for the longest time, but they discontinued that, so they don't run that anymore. So now, kind of the second best is you just have Prometheus and Grafana.
I was wondering if there's like somebody set up an instance of Grafana publicly to like do an example
dashboard. You'd have to Google search it, but yeah, they're out there, because it's the exact same metrics as the ones they're using on Ethereum. So I know there's a few dashboards you can actually just plug right into Grafana.
Yeah, I've got some. I'll just share this link in the chat for guidance and scripts and stuff.
Is it DipSlayer that has the? Do you have it integrated into your thing?
Yeah, DipSlayer's got it as well. Yeah, but yeah,
I thought I saw DipSlayer. He had his Grafana and Prometheus installation already in his stuff.
Yep. Yeah, we both got it there. Yeah, shout out DipSlayer, by the way. DipSlayer is awesome. He's got a great setup.
I saw that somebody mentioned that, so I was like, yeah, it's totally there.
So yeah, metrics as far as, it will be interesting for me, Validator dashboard, is to have something where it both has the beacon stats. We were just on the beacon deal. Something where not only for your validator, but it has, I imagine that's what they're building, not just for maybe, okay, so if I were to imagine this, again, I don't know anything about the project, but if they're building something for a Validator dashboard, I'm thinking it's something like a beacon explorer, but also you can put in your own validator and it gives you maybe your own stats, or you can plug it in or connect it some way too, maybe.
I mean, so my RPC has the beacon API exposed, so you can actually use it. So what would be useful is just having a dashboard. You could just plug in my beacon API and you're pulling the data directly from the chain, because now you don't have a third-party service that breaks constantly. This is the reason why Rabby went down yesterday, because they have a third-party indexing service. It's the reason why the Block Explorer for Block Scout breaks all the time, because the indexing of the chain is it stops, and then it messes up, and then it's got to be restarted, and it's and there's problems with that, because you're not pulling the data directly from chain, but then also the graph, right? There's data you just can't get directly from chain. You take the data from chain, and then you have to create your own database, which is what the GraphQL does, to create APIs specific to your project based on what your requirements are, but from chain data, which is, my RPC, you could pull GraphQL data from it too, and whatever, right? Doesn't matter. It's just an archive node, right? So it's like the base layer that all these third-party services query, all the users query. It's kind of like a core service. But having a dashboard that you can plug in your validators into with your deposit address, and then you could pull that data directly from, say, a full node that you run yourself. So as long as your full node's running, right, then you're pulling the data from yourself, right? That would be really useful, because that's what I was using with Prism before, because their dashboard was just querying like itself and taking the data from Prism, the client, and it showed all the metrics for the validator, the profit earnings, how many rewards you were having, all the epochs, all the finalizations, all the attesting. Like, it had all of that like on a single dashboard that was which was really great. Yeah, what's the APR for validating? It's around 25 or 26 PLS per epoch. Then, I'm not doing math here though.
Yeah, what do you think? Is it because we're at 52K now, so it's probably between 5 and 10%, somewhere through there? What the real APR? This is kind of, we know these numbers
you'd have to
aren't
do the
probably
math
perfect.
on just if you plug in an APR or APY calculator. I mean, when we were sitting at between 30 and 40 validator, 30 and 40,000 validators, we were sitting at like between 10 and 11%. I know the website says 14, but it was more like 10 or 11% if you actually do the math. But that's the minimum, because you're not accounting for, if you're inside a committee, you're getting over 100 PLS per epoch instead of like, say, 25 or 26. So you're getting like 3 to 4 times as much PLS just for like those 32 slots, right? And then it doesn't include tipping. Like, people tip you 1 million PLS. Where does that go? Well, that's a profit, right? So you have to add that in. So you got to pull that from Chain, right?
Yeah.
You got to pull that from the Beacon API and all your rewards, and then do the calculation, and then maybe save a database in some dashboard.
Do you remember when it used to be like $1,200 to be a validator? What was the lowest price? Was it like $1,200?
Oh, I mean, what's the lowest price of PLS? I mean,
yeah,
no.
it used to be much
Well, the
cheaper than it is today.
low of PLS was it 4 zeros and like a 3.5? So like the lowest
Like
it's ever been was 1120. So more like $1,200. Yeah, that was that's when PLS was like 4 zeros and a 3.5 or 3.2.
Oh, the good old days when you could set up a
that's like
validator
last
for
summer.
$1,200.
This was 6 months ago.
I think less than that, man. That was
we
bottomed.
say 4 to 6 months ago. That's when
we
it was.
bottomed in just a few months ago.
We're already back at the sacrifice prices. Isn't that so awesome? Yay!
One day, man. Is everything gonna go pulled staking, or are we gonna fork the network to make validating cheaper if PulseChain hits a penny? Some crazy price like that. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, PulseChain has the same problem that Ethereum is gonna have. So what's the solution with Ethereum? They're going layer 2. So I expect PulseChain to have layer 2 someday. Is that needed right now? No, but that's a couple cycles from now.
Rocket pool,
5 years from now. Now you're talking about validating, like the actual validating part of like consolidating, like kind of pooling your validators. I'm actually not a big fan of that. Now, because there's a lot of security risks, right? There's a lot of risk with that. Now, there are some implementations that seem to be pretty promising, and it is a thing that people do. They do it on Ethereum with liquid staking. So, but it's all, you give your money to a contract, you get a placeholder token. Could be an NFT, it could be an actual secondary token that's traded in the open market. And then you get, through that token, you get rewards from being a validator, or even NFT, the same thing, right? But you're still delegating, right? You put in X amount of money, and then they have a pool of validators, and then they're managing it, and they're getting a fee off of it. All right.
But even here, I mean, look at what is that a 10x? Even a 10x, it's gonna be 40K to be a validator from here. How's people gonna do that, man?
Well, I mean, all you need is $40,000.
That's what I'm saying. It's like there's got to be a pooled solution at some point. Like people just can't.
Well, no, I'm saying there are going to be made. They're being made right now. I'm just saying, like, I'll never use them, but I'm also a validator right now, and I was able to buy in at $1,200, and then
so what you're saying is
sacrifice. But
What you're
for
saying is,
newer
if you want to be a
people, like
validator, be
2
very
years from
early.
now, you can run your own validators, or you're going to run a pooled service. There's lots of people who run pooled service on Ethereum. It's going to be a thing. Nobody can stop it. It's the whole purpose. The whole reason I'm in PulseChain is because it's permissionless. You can do whatever you want, and people can go, I don't like you all you want. Gamma doesn't like pooled services. Well, they're just going to do what they're going to do. I just hope they don't screw over their users, you know? But I can
Do
say
you
the
think
same
people,
thing for DEXs. I can say the same thing for yield farms. I was like, make a great product. I will use you. But then I'm also going to say, depends on what you're doing. I may or may not like lending protocols, right? There's a little risk there. I like stable coins.
yeah,
You
the
know?
message here is, if you're not going to be a validator now and you think the price is going to go up a lot, are you ever going to be a validator? Like, that's the question people are asking, right?
Yeah. And then
That,
maybe they're going to be migrating to these pooled services. And then I'm going to be over here single user validating. And like, I mean, the original Bitcoin, everyone was a solo miner, and then now nobody does solo mining anymore because it's not cost, right? They take the fee to be in a pool somewhere, so they take a fee off of it, and they pool their mining resources into like 4 or 5 different places, and that's just how Bitcoin works. Well, I mean, pooled services are on Ethereum. Some of them are pretty good, it seems. They'll be on PulseChain, right? They're being built right now on PulseChain. And
yeah,
just because this dude's a snob and is like, I'm a validator already, and I will never use them, doesn't mean they're not good. Doesn't mean people aren't going to use them. You're totally, $100,000 to become a validator. For one thing, I'm super happy, awesome, having a great day. But then also, more people are going to be doing pooled services. And so those service providers will provide a service. Hopefully, it's very well managed, well executed. They'll have an incentive to do it well, to be legitimate, and they'll make money. They'll provide a service that people want and need, and then everyone's happy. Like even my free RPC service right now, it's free, and it's free, expected to be free forever. But I could always convert it to like a paid service one day, right? And be like, okay, great. I need to start charging something because now I can't keep this thing running unless I start charging. And then I come up with a business model that makes sense. There's demand. I do a good job. I get more customers. I make some money running a service that I want to run for as long as possible. And then they get a service that runs well. It's business,
Mm-hmm. I wanted to get to as well, because I know we'll get into it a little bit more, but I want to talk about just not only how to be a validator, how validating works. Because I was talking to Game in the Green Room, and I was talking about just, there's not a lot of diagrams on this. It's very complex. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of basic pieces, but basic in a nerd speak of like, okay, if you know what these things are, you can build upon them. So just want to go through this just for a couple minutes, and then we can
Sure.
hit on each one. I even have a question here in the
chat
already.
You can divide validate into 3 phases, right? You have the key creation and deposit phase, which is like a thing that people get confused on. And then there's I'm active and now I'm validating. And what does that mean? And then you're exiting. Like I'm exiting the validator, which is very similar to entering the validator. And then what does that entail? So, right, we can just do it like kind of like trying to break it into like smaller chunks.
Yeah, let me break it down a few here, because I got some notes, and then we can talk about like some of the pieces that are more interesting. So setup, again, get Linux. You can run on other operating system at your own will, whatever, but Linux is the most popular. Recommended hardware. Install the clients. Use a script, use a guide, whatever you want. Generate keys. Do all the nuances with that. Very important. Import the keys. Sync the blockchain. Once your validator is confirmed, ready to go, do not make the deposit unless it is. Otherwise, so many people who made deposits and are just like losing PLS because one thing wasn't working, whatever. So, and you can have multiple validators per server, all that stuff. It can be a single server, multiple validators, as long as you got 32 million PLS to deposit. Once you deposit, get on the network, get accepted. Takes a little bit of time there, become active and start validating. As far as the life of a validator, so the whole thing is staying in sync. Like you want to stay in sync with the latest state of the blockchain. So your validator is going to be continuously receiving, verifying, accepting new transactions into its local copy of the chain, keeping the clients up. You need to keep the clients updated, at least to the minimum, to abide by the network rules. You don't have to take every single update. You can choose the ones that you want to, read the technical details on that. I've talked about it before. But unless you want to join the fork chain, if that's happening or something, keep them up to date with the current network rules. And then being a validator, I'll break it into two parts, and we'll get into nuances in this in just a second. But execution side, so you have execution of smart contracts. Validators execute the code associated with the transaction on the EVM, or call it PVM if you want to pulsify it or whatever. And then this also means state changes to the data on the blockchain as well. So take care of that. Processing transactions, send, receive, stuff like that. Deploying new smart contracts, maintaining the state of the ledger, balances, contract storage, all that stuff. So that's the execution side. Consensus side, validating incoming transactions, so correct format, signatures, sufficient balances, senders, all that stuff. Attestation is the majority of the job. Me and Gamma get into that too, but attesting the correctness of blocks produced by other validators. Proposing blocks can be chosen at random to do so. That's collecting and organizing pending transactions into a block, publishing it for other validators to validate. Then committee participation, we'll talk about that more in a second. Sometimes validators get to vote on proposed blocks, and then they earn fees for successfully proposing and testing blocks, or penalties for being offline, acting maliciously, failing to validate, all that other stuff. And the other thing I'll cover real quick too is the network gossip. There's a few other things that are sort of somewhat related, but also validator stuff. So network gossip, validators participate in gossiping where they propagate blocks, transactions, attestations on the network to ensure everyone has the latest information. Gas fee management, setting gas prices, choosing transactions to include into the blocks based on how much people pay, all that stuff. And then light client support, generating proofs for the light clients to make them work. So let's digest that a little bit. I know I went through a lot of just the main points, but where do you want to dig into, Gamma?
So I think it's important so some key points about, say, starting your validator. Like, yes, incredibly important to sync up your full node first, because so many people, like you said, so many people think they're good, and then it come to find out their node didn't actually sync up, and now they're leaking penalties for 3 days. And then, okay, what's the difference between being slashed and actually getting leaking penalties? If you're active, your validator is active, but you're not actually online, able to attest to blocks or produce blocks, then you're going to get leaking penalties. Leaking penalties are slightly more than what you'd make if you were online. So say they're, like 30, 40, 50% more. So the way this works is if you were offline for a day, then to get back to even, it'd take you, say, a day and a half-ish. I'm just saying broad estimate. And that's leaking, right? You're getting leaked. You're not getting slashed. You're still on the network. You can leak for a really long time. But then it would take you a really long time to make that PLS back, right? Because you'd have to come back as long as you're offline, plus say 30 or 40% of the time, right? So it's important that you don't freak out if you're offline for a day, because it's going to take a day and a half, maybe 2 days to get back into profit, right? So it's not the end of the world. But if you had like a long-term move or whatever, right, then maybe you need to come up with a plan. I was like, how are you going to keep your validator? Like, you say you're offline for like 3 days. Okay, no problem. It take you, 5 days to come back. Once you turn it back on, no big deal. But if you're gone on a business trip for like 3 months, and then your validator goes offline, like 3 months, that's a long time. Maybe you want to come up with a plan where you can access your validator and keep it online with updates. Because if, like you said, updates aren't super critical to be done right away. I actually wait a couple weeks for my updates, and I know what's going on with the clients, and I do a lot of clients and a lot of nodes. And
there can be bugs and updates.
Just wait a couple weeks to make sure everybody's good, right? Nobody's complaining out there. There's not some weird thing happening. And then I update my stuff. So my validator is like the last thing So I'll have testnet nodes that I update. I'll have my mainnet RPCs updated, and my validator is like the last thing that I update after I know that everything is working, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, because as long as the consensus rules don't change, which is a hard fork, and you're going to know about a hard fork because everyone's going to be screaming about, hey, there's a hard fork, you need to update within 2 weeks, because at this block, new consensus rules are taking effect. And the way those work is, right, it's published. You have like usually weeks and weeks and weeks, like a month, 2 months out. And they say, hey, this update, right, everyone needs to be updated to this version, because on this block, new consensus rules are going to be, take effect on the chain. That everybody, more than 67% of the whole validator set, has got to be running this new version, so that we're all in sync and we don't get forked off. Right. That's not like a thing they just slip through and they're like, oh, don't worry about this. And on a Tuesday and nobody talks about it. And then now the whole network is all screwed. No, weeks in advance. And even if you didn't even know about it, they give you so much time to update to the new version that you probably don't even need to know that there was an update for that. That is a hard fork, because they give you so much time to update for the entire network to update. That's not even really a problem, because most people are going to be updating within a few weeks, the next day, if you're really aggressive, right? So you have your full node online, then you deposit, because you can have your keys on your node. Like, you set up your node the first day, you're not synced at all. You can you can create your keys. You already have your keys ready. You can put those on your validator, in your beacon chain. Start up your validator client. It's not active, it's not hurting anything, but it's running. And you know that your validator client sees 10 keys, like you loaded 10 keys in it, whatever. You haven't deposited yet, no big deal. Now you're syncing, right? The validator machine's not online. It sees that you have 10 keys. It's already there. One thing that people always get confused on is when they import their keys. They put their keys in. I know with your script. Oh, actually, this is the thing I was going to say. With your script, you have 2 different users on your server. One's like the Val1 and one's like Node. And there was a user who was like, I don't even know all mess. I was like, I wouldn't one of your chats, and I was saying, hey, there's a guy in PulseDev using your thing. And then I tried to help him, but he was in his Node user trying to start it, but then all the keys he needs to reference were on a completely different user. And I was like, how is this working? Because I'm usually, I run my stuff as root, and then you have another user that's on top of there where you do all your stuff. That's not a root user.
Yeah.
Right.
So
but you have like 2 other users, and I was like, oh, this is confusing me. I don't know what's going on here.
Just on this script, I have a node user that script creates, and then everything runs with the node user to be, the least privileged user possible. And then literally, I don't know how anyone gets confused. I mean, I know how they get confused because they don't know Linux very well, and they don't get confused with commands or whatever. But literally, if you go by these instructions completely, there's no way to mess it up. It's just software. At the end of the day, they've been battle tested. So anyways, people who set up validators don't know Linux very well, and they get confused. They miss one or whatever. But yeah, the node user is the unprivileged user that everything runs as for security purposes.
Yeah. So what it looked like for this guy was he put stuff in the val user, and then he was running under Node, and he was trying to reference stuff that was under a completely different user. I was like, I think you messed up there, buddy. Maybe you want to ask RHMax. It's like, I think you should be under this user because that's where all your stuff is. But then why are you trying to reference keys around under a different user? That doesn't make any sense to me. I do not compute what's going on here, because it seems like not the way, right? Because there's so many people who've used your stuff, no problem. I know your stuff's not broken. And I'm like, I think you messed up here, buddy, a little bit.
This is, to be fair, this is the hardest part. This is taking if you generate your keys somewhere else and then you put them on your validator. The hardest part is, oh gosh, okay, I need to get these commands correct. So, like, to be fair, is the part most people have trouble with, but I don't know how to write it out any more clear other than commands and explanation. But
no, yes, I was like, hopefully it's okay. Read your instructions, right? I was like, hey, I have my own instructions, but we're not using my instructions. My instructions aren't helping you. You used his instructions, and I'm sure it's very clear right? Because many people have done it. We've talked about it a lot. Like your instructions are awesome. And there's a bunch of other people who have great instructions too. But my instructions don't help you. If you're using David Feeder's instructions, there's slight differences that confuse people, especially if they don't know Linux. Different path structures. Your users are set up differently than the way I set mine up. And there's just changes. But yeah, it was a thing. But yeah, so going back to you were syncing your validator. You have your keys loaded. You already know, right? This is what the tie-in was. You imported your keys onto your node in the correct method. You restarted your validator. You have your validator can see your keys, because what you do, right, is you'd put in the data directory. You're going to use either the default under the same user, which the default is the client already knows what the default path is, or you're going to give it a data directory and then tell it, which is what I do, is I put my validator keys under the consensus client folder right next to the beacon chain data. It's like right there. But I had to tell the validator client that data directory is blockchain consensus, right? And then actually that's it. And then you're good. Yeah. But if you don't do that, then it's all confused. It's like, I don't see any keys. I was like, yeah, because you didn't tell it where to look for the keys. It is not going to magically know where the keys are, right? No big deal. So you have your deposit, right, file sitting in your back pocket, just ready. Well, maybe not literally in your back pocket, put in a safe or something, but sitting there, and you're syncing, and it takes you a day to sync up like a Geth node, right? I just did it on mainnet in less than 20 hours, just to prove a point that I was like, a guy was like, hey, I don't think you can do it in 24 hours. I was like, oh, I've been kind of doing it in 10 and 12 hours. I think it can be done in less than 24. Let me see if something drastically changed in the last year. I don't really run Geth that much. I run more Aragon. So I was like, oh, let me test it. No problem. I don't have a problem being wrong, but let me just gather the data and see. No big, less than 20 hours. Yeah, I'm right. Yay. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I was just
Mr. Good Internet. Yeah, I think it
was a thing. I mean, I talk to smart people, and they're like, when they say something, I'll be like, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Let me see if I'm wrong, because I'm wrong all the time. No problem. I have no problem being wrong. Challenge me, please. If I say something that's not correct, I will fix myself. Or I will prove you wrong, which is kind of actually more likely. But you know what I mean? Funny. Yeah. So you're synced up. You deposit as soon as you're synced. And your logs will tell you you're synced. You can put a curl command into Geth, into Aragon, F-syncing, that actually tells you that you're synced. So you can look at the logs and see that you're up right with your block height. But then you can actually give a curl command that calls the F-syncing method, and then it tells you if you're synced. So it's either syncing or it's synced. Really only two states, right? Pretty easy to tell. Now, that's not really in any instructions. I'm just kind of a note, that there are multiple ways to know whether or not you're syncing or not. You probably have them in your instructions. I haven't looked. But, and then you deposit, and then you go to the launch pad, right? The official launch pad that's ran on PulseChain.com, launchpad.PulseChain.com. It's now, it should be a server that you run. I'd have to look. I have all the servers on my computer, right? It's IPFS now, right? So you run it on IPFS, you run your own local server, then you run through the instructions, right? And then it has all the instructions there, but they're not really as clear as, say, an actual step-by-step instruction that you have, or my instructions that are actually much shorter. So you deposit your keys. Once you deposited your 32 million PLS into, well, it really gets burned technically. So it gets deposited into a contract from which it never comes back. And then this is a side note, but it's people are interested in these things. So what happens when you stake in the ETH staking contract to become a validator? You're actually transferring your PLS into a contract that into an address that it never comes back out of. So it's effectively burned. And then all of your principal when you unstake and all of your inflation, the rewards you get, all is reminted supply. So, fun fact for anyone who cares about that, it's a subtle difference. It's important. So, because some people think that there's like some honeypot of a contract that you can attack and you could like steal trillions and trillions of PLS. I'm like, well, no, not really, because this means it's burned. So like that PLS isn't coming back. You exit, you set your withdrawal address, your reward for being a validator, which is inflation, and then also the tips, right? You come back to your address, the one that you chose, and then when you exit, you actually get back your principal too, minus any penalties you may have incurred, of course, right? And the contract takes care of all that math. So, and that's like the most important part of like syncing up is like just waiting to sync and then depositing. You deposit, you could wait up to say 18 hours, almost a day for the deposit to be recognized. Could be shorter, could be longer. So around 18 hours or so. And people will ask after like 3 hours, hey, I haven't seen my deposit. I was like, well, you might see your deposit a few hours in, but you might be waiting 12 or 15 hours for the deposit to be recognized. And then once your deposit is recognized, then you're in the queue. So depending on how many people are in the queue ahead of you, which I believe it's 16 now, in and out, because it used to be 4, but I think it's 16 now with the upgrades. So there's not that many. Like you can go through the queue pretty fast to get in and get out of the network, but it takes a while. So once you deposit, you're not going to be active, maybe less than a day, but I think the expectation should be a day, right? For you to be active. So your validator needs to be online when you become active. Otherwise, you're going to get leaking penalties, right? And then you can start. I mean, now you're live, right? You want to talk about some of the things you need to be aware of running a validator, like any possible like internet and power backups you might recommend to your people that follow you.
Yeah, so I've talked about this too before in tweets. I mean, if you're doing, I get rid of a lot of the things that go wrong just by running in the cloud. I'm glad most people don't do that because good for decentralization. But the people who do benefit from not having to pay for utilities, worry about battery backups, stuff like that. And of course it costs more. There's like a few $100s per month depending on your specs and all that stuff for cloud hosting. However, there's advantages there. And then the advantage of running at home, of course, is okay, if you want that nerd feel, oh, I'm running my own server at home, you have all that stuff. However, again, battery backups, you got to have, you need to isolate your network. And, I got the security diagram pulled up here too of the different stuff that I've figured out and tried to synthesize as far as worrying about the local stuff and keys and all that stuff. But network security, very important. Recommend like literally segmenting the router, segmenting the validator on a different network, all that stuff. Still can talk to the internet just in case something does get happened. It's not going to affect your other computers that you do crypto on and otherwise. Yeah, there's advantages, disadvantages. But for me, being in software so long, using cloud like almost on a daily basis, to me, it was like, oh, I would want to spin it up in the cloud. I want to do that. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to do it at home. I want to put it in the corner and never look at it and just update it when I need to. Totally cool. A lot of different ways to do it. So yeah, that's a few notes on security I have there.
Yeah, I mean, I run a lot of servers in the cloud with automation, and I run my own validator at home. So like battery backup, like I have a 2-hour battery backup that's not only connected to the computer, but also to the modem and to the router, right? And it's hard lined in, right, with Ethernet cord, right? So it's not over Wi-Fi or anything, and it's all on the battery backup. So when the power goes out, my internet, well, actually I have fiber now. I have to get a battery backup on the fiber modem, but if you have cable, then you just put it on your router, your modem, your computer, and the power goes out, turns back on. if the validator runs even out, as long as the validator is running with power and it loses the internet, as soon as the internet comes back on, it'll restart back up and you don't even have to touch it. Right? Geth and Aragon should work that way. Now, whether or not the computer is set up to stay running, right, you have to do the power settings and look at some of the system settings to make sure that, right, if you lose internet or whatever, or like if you're online for a day, then it doesn't automatically shut off and all that. So that's the basic stuff, right? You want the thing to be on all the time. But one day I had power go off because of some maintenance or whatever, like 6 times. And I never once had to touch my validator. And it's running fine. The power went off. I didn't lose the internet because I was battery backed up all my internet. And then it came back on. Right? But I also have it like the same setup with my local system here. So when the power goes out, in my area, unfortunately, it goes out quite a bit. And then I don't even get any interruption because my internet is on a battery backup. And then on my system over here is under Wi-Fi, right? Other side of the house. But it's under battery backup too. That's one of the chief complaints about like disk corruption, like database corruption, because they weren't on a battery backup. Their computer just shut off out of nowhere. And then they try and restart it. And they're like, now the database is corrupted. And there are like all these weird errors and it doesn't want to start up. I was like, well, you maybe Geth and Aragon can fix it. Maybe. But a lot of times if you have like a really bad, like your whole house internet just shuts off. And then now you weren't able to do the shut off correctly, which is literally takes a couple seconds. Like when you tell the client to turn off, if you're using like a system process or if you're telling Docker to turn it off, then it gives it some time
to cleanly shut down.
Do a clean shut off, and then it saves the database, and then you might lose, a few hours. I mean, I've seen it even doing a clean shutdown. I've seen it lose like 3 days worth of blocks. Then you just turn it back on. It resyncs up those 3 days of block, which takes like 20 minutes or something, and now you're back in action. The database didn't get corrupted. It just saved at a state that was prior than what you kind of expected. But there's nothing wrong with the client. There's nothing wrong with the database. So having a battery backup is like the number one thing if you're doing like a home setup, right? That's even more important than saying like, oh, I need to have double internet or whatever. Like, yeah, the internet doesn't matter that much. Like, it's good to have like an alternative internet if your whole fiber or your cable just completely goes out for like a whole day. Like, yeah, connect it to like a like a cell, right? Cell Wi-Fi temporarily.
You can, but I don't know whose internet goes out for a week though. I would just be like, I'm just gonna lose fees for a week. I think that's.
I mean, well, I'd go online. I mean, I just moved to the cloud, but that's me. I'm just saying, right? People overthink about things that actually don't even matter, and they don't even prepare for the thing that actually does matter, which is the power. Just having a battery backup will save you so much grief.
And protecting your keys. That's the thing that matters more than anything. Make sure you do not lose your keys.
Okay. Well, here, let's talk about key management. Yes, very important. So say you start you get your validator keys, right? And you create them on a computer that's segregated, right? Which you should create the keys on a segregated computer that isn't connected to the internet and all that, right? Because it's going to generate 24 words like in the terminal, and you're going to have to write those in a piece of paper, and then it actually makes you type them onto that computer. So you need to make sure that computer isn't your daily driver Windows computer that is, you know what I mean? Like, make sure you're not a clean OS. I mean, I use Linux and Mac, but
I got four options here too. I listed on the wiki. So live CD, bootable USB, use another machine, virtual machine, cloud, and like there's a bunch of different ways to do it.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about what's the worst thing that could possibly happen, even if, so you started your validator, you made it on a system that was like, maybe not the best system. Okay. But you made your 10 keys. It gave you seeds. Okay. Hopefully those seeds are not compromised ever. Okay. So, but the worst thing that can happen if somebody gets those seeds is they recreate your validator keys. Okay.
Well,
if they make more than,
caveat.
say you made 10 validator, if you made 10 validator keys, you deposited them with the withdrawal address back to an account that you had like on a Treasure, right? Which I would recommend, back not to a MetaMask, hot wallet, or anything, to like a hardware wallet. So those withdrawals are those PLS is always only gonna ever go back to your hardware wallet that's in a safe place with seeds that are saved in metal and all that stuff, right?
One caveat though. One caveat. So make sure that you set a withdrawal address, because if you don't set a withdrawal address and they steal your seeds, they can set a withdrawal address.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. I was just talking about the withdrawal address.
Yeah, make sure you set that. Like, that's incredibly important for security. Like, I didn't realize that when I first started learning it. Wow, that is literally the way that, I mean, of course, generating separately, yes, all that's like, you should do it regardless, because you don't want them to get your keys, and they could
we're gonna do that. I'm gonna go with what's the very worst thing that could possibly happen. So you have your withdrawal address set, and it's safe in a Treasure, right? You're good. Somebody gets a hold of your seeds for your keys, right? So they can regenerate your withdrawal keys, or your keys. They can generate more of them, so they can not only deposit for you. They're not going to do that, right? So say you have 10 keys that are on a validator. So either somebody gets into your server and you accidentally kept unencrypted copies of the keys on your server, okay? But most instances have a plain text password, right, in the folder that you can look at. So it really doesn't even matter, this whole encryption thing anyway. So they get in there, they get the keys. Okay. So with those keys, if they were to say get an unencrypted folder that says these are my keys with like 10 keys in them, you'd set the withdrawal address. The worst thing that can happen is they exit your, there's two things that can happen. They could run another server with those keys and then get you slashed. Okay, that's actually the worst thing that can happen. So what happens if you get slashed? So you lose about 1 million PLS, right? And then you get back, 31.7 million PLS back to your withdrawal address. So that's like the worst thing that can happen is you lost like a little over 1 million PLS because somebody else got your keys. They ran another server as a validator. They got slashed because you're running a validator. They're running a validator with the exact same keys. You're slashed. Okay, you lost 1 million, but you still got your 32 or 31.8 million PLS back to your withdrawal address, which hopefully they don't have access to because you did it the correct way with a Treasure, with protected seeds, and like say if you were like in the cloud or something, like they don't even know you, but you're running a validator, and they get your keys because you left your validator keys, in the home folder, and you didn't delete them when you imported them, right, or something.
Yeah.
All right. So that's actually the worst thing that can happen. But you got to set the withdrawal address. If you didn't set the withdrawal address, then somebody finds your keys, then they can set the withdrawal address to their address, and then they can exit, and then they get all the and then they get all the PLS.
That's pretty much what the security diagram says. Like,
I can't even read it. I just know this stuff.
Yeah,
somehow.
I think impersonation. Yeah, like I said, impersonation or exiting. If you've set a withdrawal address, or if not, then they can set a withdrawal address and then exit and get your funds. So
yeah, that's like literally the word. I mean, so I mean, they could slash you, which you get back the PLS. Then, or they can run the validator keys themselves. Well, they would get slashed because you're running them too. They can exit for you, and then you're getting the PLS anyway. So, so it's about just setting a withdrawal address to a hardware wallet that you protect, like you have $1 billion in it, right? Even if you have $100, protect it like you have $1 billion, right? And you're good, and you can host it in the cloud, no problem, right? You do the proper server security, right? Firewalls, and you have all these other server related things, right? We have the 2 levels of security with you have a root user, you have a unprivileged other user, you run everything in, you have your firewall set so that they're just not randomly like getting into your server. Oh, one thing that people usually don't talk about is like if you're in the cloud, you usually have a dashboard, you have a company that you actually go in through. So making sure you have 2FA and proper usernames and passwords on those accounts. Like if you have a AWS or you have a DigitalOcean or wherever, have proper like Google Authenticator, right? Not like SMS 2FA.
Or hardware keys.
You're doing a super job. Your server is locked down. Like they're never getting into your server. And then they just walk in through the dashboard, make their own keys, get in through the console, through the dashboard. And you're like, okay, well, that didn't work out very well. Now they're in your server anyway, because it just came in through the dashboard. Just have 2FA, proper passwords,
Anything else? Let's got to wrap up here in a second, but
sure.
Like we covered the key generation. We covered, security side, the penalties, the fees, different fees. I mean, I did other content on the fees you can earn and stuff like that too. The different kinds. I've got, the effectiveness. A lot of people are complaining about that. Oh, why is my validator effectiveness not 100%?
You're never going to have 100% effectiveness. Like 99, 98. If you're in like high 90s, like 95, 98, don't complain. You're doing great.
Yeah.
Like I'm at 99% effectiveness forever. And that's just how it is, I'm doing great.
Validators may not be as cheap as they once were. They aren't as cheap as they once were, and they may not be that cheap in the future too. We do not know, but success of this network continues. Boy, we got some good problems to have if you were here early.
Yeah, no problem. Before we wrap up, I'll say follow me on Twitter at gamma.io, right? It's right there in there at gamma.io, or my website for my RPC is right there. It's free to use. Beacon chain, debug, trace. Like I turn on everything so you could I don't know if Block Scout would work through it if you were indexing, but you should probably run your own. I don't know if you're going to be indexing. GraphQL probably should work through it if you needed to do that. But as a regular user, you could use it, Web3, whatever. Provided as a service, and I do stuff. I used to be Gamma DevOps, but now I rebranded to more general purpose name. Confuses people sometimes.
It looks cool, but I could imagine how it confuses people who haven't seen Elite speak before. Very cool, dude. Appreciate you coming on, being in the community again. You do a ton of amazing stuff. I learned a lot from you when I was first starting to do validating, and just really appreciate it. I don't think anyone gets enough thanks for all the just grassroots stuff that people do in this community. So I really want to highlight you and tell you I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, people ask me all the time, I was like, how can I get in? How can I help out? I was like, just start helping. Like I started out free, just helping in Telegram, and then I can do tech stuff. So I started helping there. And then I found a niche of part of PulseChain that I know how to do and I can do well. That's actually useful. And then you do that, right?
Stop fighting, start helping. That's
it's all good. Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
Of course, man. Hopefully it won't be the last. Hopefully we get on here again and talk about stuff. We'll be talking about, hey, like, what are we going to do? PulseChain's it's $50K to be a validator. Why is the world going to end? Maybe that's next time. Next year.
Oh my God, only 50. Oh my God.
Yeah, we'll be crying with some validator fees and our virtual validator fees, crying tears.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh my God, I'm making so much money and being a validator. So sad.
Yeah. All right, man. Everyone, appreciate you all. Sorry we didn't get all the questions today. There are a lot in the chat. We got to as many as we could. But add us on Twitter or Telegram if you're.
I'm almost 5,000 users, by the way. So I got like another 80 to go. You know what I mean? Help me out.
Nice. Yes. Help them out. Spread the word, and that's all we got for you today. Scivive and 5555. See you, everyone.
Cool. Later.